The TTArtisan Tilt 35mm f1.4 is not your typical lens. It's compact, fast at f1.4 and affordable, but it also does something very interesting. It tilts. TTArtisan sent me this lens for review, but this video is not sponsored. All the opinions and thoughts you're going to hear are entirely my own. After spending some time with it shooting on the Fuji X-T5, it opened up new photographic avenues for me and taught me a lot about using unusual tools to achieve unexpected results. This little manual lens challenged the way I compose, how I approach depth, and how I tell visual stories through photography. It forced me to think differently, and that alone makes it worth talking about. Today I'll walk you through what a tilt lens actually is, how this one works in practice, and how it performs in real-world street, urban, and detail photography. Let's get into it. Let's start with what makes this lens so different. This is a tilt lens. In a traditional lens, the plane of focus is parallel to the sensor, flat and predictable. But once you tilt your lens, you change this angle. The plane of focus can now slice diagonally forward or backward across your scene. This opens up a world of different possibilities. You can isolate the subject anywhere in the photo, creating images that feel cinematic or even surreal. You can decide exactly where the blur falls, shaping the bokeh in your scene, keeping your subject perfectly sharp no matter where they are positioned in the frame. You can create what's called a miniature effect, where a real-world scene now looks like a tiny miniature model. Or you can use it subtly, adding focus or blur wherever you want it in the scene, without drawing attention to the effect. This is something you often see in high-end product or architectural photography, but when you bring that to street photography, it opens up completely new ways of bringing attention to your subject. The TTArtisan Tilt 35mm f1.4 feels solid in the hands. It's built entirely out of metal, compact and weighty in just the right way. As expected, it's a fully manual lens. You've got a smooth and robust aperture ring that moves confidently, a well-damped focus ring that's easy to use even when you're working slowly and deliberately with composition. The tilt mechanism is controlled by a small locking knob on the side of the lens. You loosen it, angle the front of the lens in the direction you want, and then tighten it again. It's simple and intuitive. The mechanism feels surprisingly secure. Once locked, it stays in place even as you walk and shoot on the go. The lens also features a second knob that lets you rotate the tilt direction from the base, allowing you to choose the precise tilt angle, whether vertical, diagonal, or horizontal, depending on your composition. Mounted on the Fuji X-T5, this lens balances beautifully. It doesn't feel like a specialist lens in the hand, it just feels like a small manual prime. That is until you start tilting it. That's when you remember that you are actually working with something different. If you are enjoying this video so far, hit the like button and consider subscribing with a bell. Let's talk about performance. Wide open at f1.4, center sharpness is decent for a budget lens like this. The edges and corners soften quite noticeably. However, stopping down to f2.8 already brings a clear improvement. Sharpness increases in the center and the edges start to clean up. By f4 or f5.6, the lens delivers solid sharpness across the frame even when tilted. Color rendition leans toward neutral and feels natural overall. There is some chromatic aberration and color fringing visible, particularly at wider apertures, but it improves noticeably when stopped down to f4 or f5.6. Vignetting is definitely present at f1.4, but in most cases it isn't distracting, especially if you're using tilt to draw focus toward the center of the frame. One thing to note is that this lens is prone to flare when shooting directly against bright light, regardless of the aperture. That can be a creative tool or a challenge depending on your goals. On the flip side, it can also create some nice sun stars, especially when you're shooting top down. This makes shooting against artificial lights an interesting balance to manage. What truly stands out though is the bokeh. It's soft, smooth, and when paired with tilt, it takes on a painterly, almost dreamlike quality. The background blur rolls off in a way that adds real depth to the image, making even simple scenes feel cinematic. In my opinion, this is one of the strongest and most unique aspects of this lens. This is where this lens truly surprised me. Out in the world, in the streets, in urban environments and when shooting close-up details, the tilt effect stopped feeling like a novelty and started feeling like a real creative tool. Because this is a manual focus lens, slowing down comes naturally. Instead of quickly reacting to the scene and firing off shots, I found myself taking a step back. I started analyzing angles, visualizing the plane of focus, and started being far more intentional about where I wanted the viewer's eye to go. With tilt, I could isolate a person diagonally through a crowd. I could transform the edge of a building into a clean abstract shape. Even a simple reflection took a dreamlike quality. All because I had full control over where I wanted the focus to land in the frame. Yes, manual focus slows you down. And yes, still takes a bit of getting used to. But that's exactly the point. This lens isn't about speed or convenience. It's about intention and control. And in that slower, more deliberate process, I found myself thinking more deeply about the photos I was making. For me, that's where the real value of this lens lies. Of course, no lens is perfect. There are a few things you need to be aware of if you're considering this lens. First, it's fully manual. This includes focusing and aperture control, no EXIF data and no autofocus. That might be fine for deliberate shooters, but it's not for fast-paced reactive photography. Second, there is no weather sealing, so if you are shooting in unpredictable weather, be cautious. The tilt mechanism, although well built, it requires you to stop and adjust. It's not something you can do quickly, mid-frame, without planning ahead. And third, although the tilt effect is powerful, it's also very easy to overdo. Used excessively, it can make your photos look gimmicky or forced. The key is subtlety, using the tilt effect to enhance, not dominate the compositions. This lens reminded me of something I often overlook. Creativity doesn't come from the gear itself, but the right gear can inspire you to see and create in new ways. The TTArtisan 35mm f1.4 tilt taught me how to see photography in a different way, given that this was my first experience with a tilt lens. It pushed me to think deliberately about depth, separation and storytelling through focus. Using this lens felt less like just capturing the photos and more like carefully crafting the images. For someone like me who's always looking for a new creative challenge, that's exactly what makes this lens genuinely exciting. Should you buy this lens? If you're someone who loves experimenting, who enjoys manual shooting, and for looking for a budget-friendly way to unlock different kinds of creativity, then yes, I think this lens is worth a serious look. At around $169 at the moment of shooting this video, this is an attractive option for someone who is actively looking for a tilt lens. For street photography, urban and detail photography, this lens gives you a visual voice that is very hard to replicate with any other kind of lens. It's not for everyone. But if you have a specific creative vision, understand the limitations of this lens and embrace the learning curve, this lens rewards you with something that most lenses don't: the power to shape your focus, literally and creatively. If you have any questions about this lens, feel free to drop them down in the comments. And if you enjoyed the video, consider liking and subscribing. Now if you want to explore more conventional 35mm photography, click and watch this video next. That was all for today, guys. Thank you very much for watching. Until next time, I will see you on the streets. Bye bye.